Greetings, everybody. We are back around the table again for another episode of the Pokey Factor. Today we are going to be taking a look at multi-tools and pocket knives with multiple uses and stuff like that in them. But first we will go through what everyone has in their pockets. Paul!
Oh God. Why would you start with me?
Because I started with Joe last time. I
have a Benchmade Anthem.
But no one will read because it's upside down.
I did it on purpose. It's a knife. It's very nice. I like
it is.
One piece.
Yep.
Integral, titanium, 20 CV that you haven't polished yet.
Yet.
Yeah. Anyway.
No.
So disappointed.
What are you carrying?
I've got my Benchmade Crooked River. Been having a fun weekend of camping, or not camping, but hiking and hunting and fishing and stuff, and it was an appropriate knife for today.
We were on a crooked river.
Yes, we were.
True facts.
Yep.
It's true. It's a true story. I'm going to go with the fixed blade. I was rocking the Bark River Gunny Sidekick today because I was also on said river, and it's a nice one to have on the hip just in case you need to slice and dice anything. Mainly pepperoni today because all the fish we caught was catch and release.
Yeah, fair enough. So.
Although I nearly lost the washer earlier, taking it apart. M4 Gil Bradley too.
It was a tense few moments there after the washer slipped onto the patio and down between the slats.
Found it digging in the dirt. Thank you for Dennis for helping me look with your flashlight.
Yeah, I didn't climb in. I just used my flashlight. Yes, I made Joe do the dirty work on that.
Well, I lost the part.
Yeah.
Anyway, found it.
All is good again.
Yeah.
Claris MI7 saves the day again.
And after what I said last week, the Gale Bradley does get a pass for its liner. It does. It's very nice.
I am shaking my head.
I am agreeing with you that it is nice.
He approves, though.
All right. At your rich fraction. All right.
No. Jesus Christ.
No. Apologies not
Superstar.
accepted. In a week to think about it. Think about your actions.
I'm going to sit in the corner.
This is pretty harsh.
So,
no napping for you.
The reason we're
you
here.
You don't get to get out that easy.
The reason we're here. Yeah, you don't get a time out. There's no way.
Please?
The reason we're here. The reason we're here.
So why are we here?
I don't know.
I heard there's a reason.
There's 70 some odd people watching us is why we're here.
Yeah. Hopefully they still are.
Thanks for watching why you're here.
In the title of the video, which you've already read, we have two major reasons why they're here.
Mm-hmm.
Leatherman.
Leatherman.
And Victorinox.
But first, Victorinox.
Yes. We'll just kind of jump into them by starting off with a bit of a rundown in the history. And seeing as how Victorinox is more historic and came first, they get to go first.
Yeah, and then we'll do some comparisons and stuff like that between the different models and stuff. But yeah, okay, Victorinox. Right off the bat, the quick history of them. They started way back in 1884 is when they started. Carl Eisner. I'm not Swiss, so I did my best on that one. Yeah, and his mother Victoria started the company. They were called, I believe, the Eisner Cutlery Company or something to that effect. Started making, I believe, pocket knives as well as just normal cutlery. Realized that they couldn't do a small market. So in 1891, decided to jump into a multi-pocket knife. Wow, that's a weird one. They're all weird ones that we got here. That was essentially the first multi-tool pocket knife. We do have an image we're going to throw up there of the very first one.
Yeah.
It had a large blade. It had a kind of small, but it almost looked like it was more of a flat screwdriver, pry bar, chisel-y looking thing. It had a awl, which was also on the front at the time, and then it had a can opener for the fourth, which was completely different looking.
Yeah, what they became.
Looked like an evil-looking lobster claw.
Yeah, they did.
The first one. So it came with those 4 tools, almost Barlow looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did have a little bit of a bolster and the slight taper to it.
Kind of classy looking though. I mean,
Yeah, it was.
Thinking about them all polished up back in the day, yeah, I had probably owned at least one.
I bet you they didn't stay polished for very long.
Oh, probably.
No.
So in 1897, he introduced, this was the soldier's knife right off the bat for the Swiss Army.
These specific tools, this model is the...
The Tinker.
Yes, this
is
is the Tinker.
In particular. In 1897, he came out with the Officer, which was the addition of a corkscrew. So
The fact that officers got wine.
Yes. Yeah. It was after hours.
Yeah.
It was fantastic, and they needed a corkscrew. These guys maybe were smart enough to realize that you could probably just dig it out with the drink it that way. Because
they weren't letting the bottle get between them.
Let's
and
be
their
honest here. When it came to after hours, I'm pretty sure all of the soldiers were doing a little bit of drinking at that point in time.
Chances are, for sure, yeah.
So 1921, somewhere in between 1921 and then, changed the name to be named after his mother, Victoria. He didn't have the inox on the end. I don't know exactly what the company name was called, but it was Victoria something something. Until 1921, when stainless steels became popular enough and became to the Swiss market that they could start using them, and he added the word inox, which is actually from the French word inoxydable, which is stainless steel. Wow, that was terrible.
That's a lot of the effort, though.
Yeah.
We live in a bilingual country. It's amazing.
I am on the wrong side of those bilingualities.
I was going to say, we live on the other side of the bilingual country.
I went to Montreal this year, and it was embarrassing.
Apologizing constantly.
So that's where the word inox came from. He threw it onto his mother's name, Victoria, and that's where you get Victorinox. So
Interesting.
that's how that all came to be, and that still stands to this day. Very early on, there was another company called Wenger. That was supposedly did supply the Swiss Army. For one point in time, they were a German company. And Victorinox can't out and out say that they were being a copycat and a knockoff, but they did say very early on after their model came out, lookalikes started to pop up. In particular, a very famous German company. So you can
read between the lines.
Think that that's the Wenger, and they've been buying back and forth ever since, type of thing. So we'll get to World War II. All the American boys go ship over. They fight the good fight, and somewhere along the way, Switzerland comes into play, and their army comes into play where the soldier was being. And there was a bunch of American boys that decided to bring the Victorinox soldier's knife back to the States. And that's really what kind of popularized Swiss Army and brought it to the world. Swip your stuff. Come on.
Slip it up.
I gotta swip. I guarantee you gotta swip my stuff. Coming up here, but
we'll get to that.
So, super funny thing about U.S. soldiers bringing it along the way. In the interpretations of Swiss, and the word Victorinox got lost in translation, and they didn't really know how to say the word Victorinox or make it clear. So they just called it the Swiss Army knife because it was the knife that the Swiss Army used. So the American boys called it the Swiss Army knife. And that still to this day is a more famous term than the company Victorinox is.
Yeah.
If you ask people Victorinox, they are very confused sometimes on what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of wondering, I know it didn't play really into this episode because we were focusing on Victorinox and Leatherman as the brands themselves rather than the styles. I'm just kind of curious as to when Wagner started doing the copycat versions, and if it was before the World Wars, or if it was after, when Germany was trying to recoup and kind of get their...
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it was prior to either one of the World Wars.
Fair enough.
If I were to take a guess, we can maybe throw a date up, go bloop, and with the date, and maybe get that lucky if we're lucky and someone does homework to make up for maybe not doing homework this week. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, it's
probably not going to happen.
So Wenger, but I believe it was pre-war.
Fair enough.
In between there, this came into play, and again, we might be able to bloop another date on when the A-locks came into play. But Victorinox threw A-locks very early on. It was, I want to say, 60s.
Really, that far back?
Yeah.
Huh.
Tell them what ALOX means.
Aluminum?
Aluminum handles, right?
Dimpled aluminum, sometimes smooth, because I think they've got one called the Secretary Pocket Pal something with
Yes,
the
they do.
hey. That's a smooth aluminum.
Fair enough.
But they do things like this one. This one's the Pioneer. The Farmers, the Bantams, they do some really cool. They do a mini champ A-locks that's kind of fancy.
And one thing that's become really popular lately is the variety of colors that they do.
The limited
in the
edition?
A-locks.
Yeah, limited editions year per year.
Do you guys know about the partnership with the Coffee K-Cup Company and Swiss Army?
No.
I think I have remembered hearing about it, but I had forgotten.
Okay, I forget what the K-Cup Company is called, but
Keurig?
No, it's not Keurig.
Oh, okay.
It's another one.
Okay, fair enough.
We'd have to look it up and maybe again bloop it in there, but that's a lot of blooping. We'll see.
Too much blueberry.
We're just gonna have a black bar that says centered over top of the blooping. But their K-cups are made out of an aluminum, a very thin aluminum. But they've started doing a recycling program that is actually successful enough that they come out with limited edition Swiss Army knife scales with recyclable aluminum from the K-cups.
Nice.
And they have the same colors as what the K-cups have. So it's like a mocha-y looking one. And
that's
it's a green one for the Mountain Brew and a pale blue one for the, whatever, right?
Very
So,
cool.
yeah, but you know what color they are because of the,
And
the
it matches the coffee that you potentially would be drinking.
and a renewable resource that they're putting back into something. And it's super cool that they started doing that. They didn't start doing that up until maybe the last couple, 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a pretty recent thing.
I think they started doing the coffee cup thing, but super cool that the aluminums and their recycling and being green and friendly.
Working out that way is good for sure.
So I guess we can talk about their other line. They started to come into watches, bags, things like that. But those kind of go hand in hand with the almost the downfall of Victorinox, which didn't really happen until 2001. And in 2001, good old 9/11 happened. And apparently Victorinox hit the brick wall upon brick walls, and all of a sudden things that were okay to carry
On an airplane.
on an airplane, carry on. Even I think undercarriage probably got super strict for a while.
For a while, yeah.
Yeah, just because of airport probably crime and stuff like that, even type of thing.
Yeah.
They say they lost 30% of their sales in the next year alone, type of thing, from a
that's-
1 year slide. That's insane.
Yeah, that's a dip for
That
sure.
hurts.
And I think that's where their marketing between all their other products came in. Whether it was their clothing line, their bag line, the colognes, the perfumes, the whatever.
Watches.
The watches
Yeah.
were always a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it became a rebranding process to try to.
It wasn't so much that these were their primary theme and those were all secondary. It became everything was primary.
Yeah, you weren't even selling a tool anymore. You were selling a lifestyle, a brand, a whatever type of.
They pushed
All
that
I
pretty hard for
wore
a number of years.
cologne-wise, all I wore cologne-wise in high school was Swiss Army.
And I think somewhere along the way, I did have Swiss Army cologne too, and I remember it not I've gone on to other things.
Very
Whatever,
generic.
but never a terrible thing, but never a blow your away thing either, right? So, I guess recovered because of the branding. After that, I recovered enough because the rebranding worked, and you've even got places like, what's the luggage place that we have? Even in next to our shop.
Bentley?
Bentley's,
Yeah.
yeah. Have Swiss Army bags and stuff like that. You think about how prolific they are now.
I've seen Swiss Army bags even in the source previously as laptop bags.
Yeah, for sure.
They're everywhere.
So that recovered enough. In 2008, they had a little bit of a revamp, and the soldier with the 4 parts became the soldier. Wow, that got clangy.
Yeah.
Became the soldier with the locking blade. And maybe we can bloopy another, censored bloopings, because that's a bunch of bloopings. locking blade soldier with the hole in it that you can now open one-handed.
One-handed, yeah.
And I don't know if that was the first locking blade that they came out with, but now, ever since then, they've come out with an entire series of locking blades.
Yeah.
Crazy Swiss Armies. Sorry, before we Leatherman it up. Like, the variety that you have in classics and forms, and they exploded that very early on.
Thanks.
Yeah, Swiss Army actually, or Victorinox actually has a few different categories that they lump the blades into, and it's actually based off of the length of the handles.
We don't
In millimeters, isn't it?
Yeah, in millimeters.
We don't have a mid-sized one here.
No, we don't, or the large, which the soldier would be.
The
in.
locking soldier one here, but we
Yeah.
do have the small one, and we've got the normal 93 millimeter is what they call these ones that they all know and love.
And they make these like all the way up to like.
They made a couple
Ridiculous.
commemorative ones that
The
are
ones
just
that are
absolutely
ridiculous.
ridiculous. But
Yeah.
the Swiss champ, which is this one here, they've got about 4 variations of a Swiss champ, but they're all essentially that
The same
ridiculous.
width. Yeah.
That big. And that happened even pre-war as well. The varieties started before the First and the Second World War as well, for them getting into it. But then we jumped all the way back to them doing this stuff, and then we're going to jump all the way forward to 1980 something. Someone else talk.
1983, Leatherman came out with their first model. It was actually the PST, the Pocket Survival Tool. This one sitting here is actually the Super Tool 300, but it's closest to one of the originals that we had access to. Even though it did originally come out in 83, the first patent that Mr. Leatherman was able to get was in 1980 for a prototype model of these guys that he had called Mr. Crunch.
Sounds like a candy bar, but
A candy bar or like some crazy robot from like anime.
We're
Oh.
zoomed in.
We are zoomed in.
How long have we been zoomed in for?
I'm not sure.
that's okay. Everything was still on the surface.
Yeah,
That might have been a while.
it might have been a while, yes.
Zooming in.
So yeah, kind of the inspiration that brought forth the brainchild of creating the Leatherman was a road trip across Europe and having to deal with making repairs on cars, fixing loose wires, fixing crappy leaking faucets in hostels, stuff like that, and not having a sufficient tool. And he found that any of the Boy Scout, Swiss Army type style knives were a little bit of a not as beefy of a tool as he would have liked. So he pretty much wanted to make a beefier Swiss Army Boy Scout knife with pliers in them.
And a proper pair of
Yeah.
pliers.
Yeah, pliers as your main tool.
Mm-hmm.
And by proper, maybe this might be the first comparison. But
And again, with us,
Yeah.
with the Swiss champ, yes, we have this, but with the spring,
They're
being
decent tweezers.
the same thing that is on their scissors
Yeah.
Yeah.
as far as locking arms with a proper pivot goes. That's not a fair fight.
no.
It's,
Yeah.
No,
But just to show what was available roughly at the same time,
it's definitely a knife at a gunfight.
in the Thunderdome, it's not fair. It's
Mhm.
fuzzy bunnies against
You ain't
Mad
shit.
Max.
basically. Sorry.
So yeah, over the 25 years or so that Leatherman has been a company, they have currently got 37 models in production and have retired 28 models. So they have definitely got a great selection out there, but not as close to how many different varieties that Swiss Army
Holy,
knife.
I would
like
have
the
no
big-
idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so many.
It's easy when you can just be like, okay, I'm going to take this one tool out and swap it out with that, and now it's a different model.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
still the same body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas there are different anyway, we're getting off track, but there are versions of Leatherman where one tool is replaced with another,
Oh, very much so
Yeah.
as well. Yeah,
and very
for
rarely
sure
will they
are.
rename
Yeah.
the whole tool. Very,
Of
very
course,
rarely.
Of course.
Yeah.
Which is less frequent than.
Yeah.
There's like more chassis that tools go into.
And the funny thing is with the Swiss Army ones is names are what they were marketed towards.
Mhm.
The mountaineer, the huntsman, the fisherman,
The camper,
the
the
tinker.
tinker.
So it's funny that you take one tool out and you put it in, and you're like, new marketing. It's now a ranger, not a craftsman. What are you talking about?
I guess it worked. I mean, the marketing must have worked.
This isn't for the huntsman, or this isn't for the outdoorsy guy. This is for the tool guys because it has pliers. This is for the huntsy guys because it has a saw.
Yeah.
It's like,
Only difference.
Whereas Leatherman just gives them other random names. It's just like, you're a sidekick now. Like, it's,
You're a wingman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just them trying to pick up chicks. He's got wingmen. He's got sidekicks.
Yeah, could be.
But you're the star of the show.
You're the star.
So where did they go from there after that road trip in Europe?
That was in like 77, 78-ish, and from there it was Mr. Crunch and the prototype.
Those were like vice grip style pliers. Yeah.
That name again
Is
is
Mr.
Mr. Crunch.
Don't you dare forget it.
Sorry, I had to do it.
Was there much else for the history? That's pretty much like how they got started.
Yeah. He had gone around to a couple different companies and wasn't really successful on getting anything going. And I bet those companies are kicking themselves now.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, there was a documentary that was released fairly recently about that, and I remember seeing some of the letters, the rejection letters, like, we don't think the market is now in a viable state for... It's like, are you kidding me? Holy crap. Like, think about how much Leatherman has become a household name, even for multi-tools that aren't Leatherman.
Oh, I was going to say, it's basically Kleenex at this point.
Yeah, Band-Aid.
Yeah.
People talk about a Leatherman, and they are just talking about a
Multi-tool.
And they whip out a Gerber multi-tool. They're like, that's not a Leatherman. Like, of course it is. What are you talking about?
So yeah, one of the really neat things about the Leatherman stuff, and I'm sure it wasn't this way from their initial get up and go, I don't know exactly when it had started, but all of their tools are completely automatedly machine made.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That explains the bevels.
Could be, but the only time a human hand touches any of their tools in a factory is for warranty work.
Yeah, it's a robotic arm that
Okay.
sharpens the knife bevels, even.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a fully automated process, all in the States.
Kapow.
Yep. There's that guy with all of them out.
That's
So
a super tool.
This
300.
Yes. So this is kind of a bit of a throwback to the earlier models of Leatherman. And there are no accessible tools from the outside, whereas most modern Leatherman tools
You can
actually
use the
have.
knife.
You can at least get to your knife blade.
Can't believe these thumbs like that.
And
Right?
The saw blade. Well, of course.
I was a little bit impressed.
How else do you develop that kind of blade play? I'm sure that's what it is, but.
Customs would totally stop your knife.
Okay, can I spy you off it? Like, no, not really. But yeah, this one is kind of an older style with that sandwich sort of construction. Yeah.
Well, how the frame of the handles have actually been one piece that's folded over.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to say, once the tools are open and out, I actually find this to be a little bit more comfortable in the hand to use because it is smoother on the outside. There's no sharp corners anywhere.
Although, I will say, one of my complaints to use the knife blade is when you are using the knife blade itself, and this is more like, is that you've got this in the way.
Yeah, it'd be nice
So
if
if you're doing any sort of cutting tasks that you've got, I can't cut down anymore.
Whereas some of the other models
Sure you
have it.
can. What are you talking about?
Okay, yeah, you can cheat. Yeah, for sure.
Or you can even two-hand it.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah,
Get yourself a lanyard to wrap around your forearm.
But yeah, some of the other models have it so the blade is lined up with that edge.
And that is the more modern way that Leatherman seems to be producing their multi-tools. The knives are usually accessible and they're out from the exterior.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. But I do appreciate that this is kind of the fall back to the original design.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're talking about all the things with the Leathermans. But yes, the final note is that the Leatherman, this is their anniversary series for 2018.
35 years.
The 35-year, they re-released their PST, which was...
The pocket survival tool.
Yeah, all of those good times, the first tool. Really cool brown leather, retro-looking 80s sheath that came with it. So it was kind of a nice, flashback to the past. to the future, to the past. You know,
To somewhere.
Is that a flashback to a flash forward?
it's Back to the Future. Yeah.
That's a flashback.
I think
to a flash forward for
Michael
sure.
J. Fox is involved.
Mhm.
There might be sponsorships. It's
I would be so involved with that.
Anyway.
I need that for myself.
I need that in my life.
so. On that note, that's the end of the Leatherman. That's all we're going to Leatherman about.
No, it's not, because we're going to talk about opinions. And
No,
those will
no
come
one
out.
cares about that. All right,
You go away.
opinions.
Let's stop with his opinion. What's your opinion?
Well, my opinion, from the collection here tonight, these are the 3 that I own. Leatherman Skeletal CX, Leatherman Sidekick, and a Victorinox Tinker with alternate handle scales. Comparing the 3 of them to each other, I do like the blade profile on the Victorinox more than I like the really fat behind the edge blades that the Leatherman has. I can only equate this to being an American knife made by an American for Americans, and people who are going to abuse their stuff maybe need a bit more material to avoid that sort of damage. That's my way of rationalizing it.
Maybe.
That being said, I've popped zip ties with this knife, and it works better than a lot of my other thin blades. So I started off with this thinking that I really needed a pair of pliers, and this was the model at the time that had the pocket clip. And I thought, you know what, okay, these are all going to be relatively useful. I love the fact that these were spring-loaded.
Yeah, I love that feature.
Super great. Eventually found out that there was a version of the Leatherman that came with 154 cm for the blade steel, which for me is a bit of a hit on Victorinox. They really only seem to use the same blade steel. Even though there's there's not nearly as many tools as there are in other Leathermans in this particular one. We've got 2 different bits. Here, I'll bring those guys out. 2 Phillips, 2 flathead, which honestly have saved my life a few occasions. Have been absolutely awesome to have. Carabiner, pocket clip, blade, wire cutter, and pliers. It's a relatively simple tool, but this is kind of the direction of my use of multi-tools has gone in the last few years.
You have the sidekick, but I had the wingman, and I loved carrying that thing until I lost it. It slipped into my pocket at some point, but it's a fantastic tool.
Yeah.
That fits in your pocket, and it's lightweight. You can carry it anywhere.
The only difference between the 2 was that mine had a saw, yours has a pair of scissors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise the internal tools were all the same. Personally, I think that if I were to take one tool and it were to be my everything, including knife blade, I'd probably go with a Leatherman just because it has 154 in the blade. It's going to hold its edge a bit longer. I can always reprofile it if I think I need something a bit more slicey.
Yeah.
If I could find a Victorinox with like 154 or a Sandvik or something, I would be
In a
blown away.
heartbeat.
Oh yeah, that would be nice. Like same kind of idea as CRKT if they just did a line up with upgraded steel, and that would be cool.
We're steel snobs, let's be honest.
This is true. This is true. We are.
And I mean, the 420 high carbon from the standard lineup on Leathermans, it's not bad per se, but it's if you're going to be comparing it to the likes of Benchmade or Spyderco, it just there is no comparison.
Yeah.
Well, that's not fair.
No.
Well, of course, in a multi-tool category. And it's, I mean, even Spyderco's multi-tools, look at them. They're 8CR, 13 MOV.
Yeah, even that's going to be better.
Their bug lineup, or what are those new clippets?
Yeah.
The ones
they
with
have.
the multiple blades and
Yeah.
the ball openers and stuff. Those are cool.
Even those ones, I mean, 8CR, you can call it slightly more reputable, but at the end of the day, it's 420 high carbon or the Inox 440A, whatever this
It's
happens
still
to be,
serviceable,
whatever, right?
Yeah.
They're all in the same kind of category, right? So, I don't know. It's for me, Leathermans are awesome, but it depends on what you're using them for.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, and for me, I work around in my garage a lot, and I have to do lots of adjustments with Phillips and flatheads, so those tend to come with me, and I like having pliers when I'm out and about. And I'm not a fan of the Victorinox pliers.
No, the Victorinox pliers, we got them on the Swiss Champion, we showed them earlier.
We'll have them
They really are pretty weak compared to even the smallest set of pliers that Leatherman has to offer,
I
right?
jokingly called them tweezers before, but I think they would actually work better as tweezers than they would as pliers.
Like,
Sort of like
even compared to a squirt, and we don't have a squirt, but we do have a micra,
which is about the same size.
which is the same size,
Yeah.
but instead of having scissors, they've got pliers. And even with the squirt or the micra, I would rely on this.
More.
Or even the spring, because at the end of the day, this spring is going to fail. It's going to gum up here. This on this single pivot system with the arms is going to be a much more long-lasting, much more reliable system.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this won't work for once in a very, very rare occasion sort of task. I think that would be fine. But it depends on what that task is pretty heavily.
Yeah.
Like tightening bolts for a vice stand at college was done with this guy. I would not have been able to do that with a tool like this.
Definitely not.
But if you're tightening things like, a motherboard screw holding
Yeah.
it in place on a tower or something like that,
Yeah.
that would be more than enough to do a little tightening or
Yeah,
something like
for
that.
sure.
So the reason that Leatherman was invented in the first place
Yeah.
was for a gadgety, urban type of fix-it
Yeah.
around,
Essentially having a simplified toolbox in your pocket sort of thing.
Yes, and things he could use on the go to fix things that he would see, not necessarily in a survivally or a camping or an outdoor situation, things you would see traveling around that you could fix those problems easily and make your lifestyle more comfortable.
Yeah. Quick little car fixes, tightening up a clamp on a hose, screwing back down loose wires, helping to fix leaky faucets, stuff like that were the original inspirations for those guys.
You could almost say more like EDC style.
Yeah.
Very.
Where's the wave?
Oh, right here.
So with that in mind, I mean, the PST came and went, but ultimately the Wave has become the gold standard on Leathermans. This guy here is what everyone's go-to is. There's the Charge, that's the higher end, and the Charge TTI that has two T's with
Both
an
of
I. It's got S30 and titanium, but with this guy, this is my Huntsman. It's actually a blue Huntsman that they had, and this guy I use on a regular basis. And with this in mind, this was meant for the Army, it was meant for soldiers, it was meant for more of a survival-y situation. And from its get-go, it was meant to be more of a survival type style knife.
While drinking your wine.
Yeah.
Of course.
How else are you going to survive?
Touche.
Have you been in the Swiss Army lately? But one of the big reasons I carry any of these tools, it's not a day-to-day activity. It's actually outdoor camping, bushcrafty, survivally, as a little bit of an all-in-one tool to have as a backup for a backup. Whether it's the knife, whether it's the scissors, whether it's the saw, you might have primaries, but this little tool is a backup all in itself to have, just in case you need it. I've been outdoors doing things all weekend long. I've used this both days I was outdoors, and it came in super handy on both days.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, and what I personally use, I have to lean towards the Swiss Army. Now, I don't think
Well,
anything like the good old Swiss champ. Let's just show it from this angle so you can't see how thick. It's actually ridiculous.
Well,
really size.
if you're seeing them, you'll probably still see the levels going
If
down.
you zoom in, reduce them.
Yeah.
Good old camera magic.
Yeah.
Throw that in there, and it's ridiculous. Yeah, turn those all sideways now while we're still zoomed in. Yeah, like that Swiss champ is, and this is not the thickest Swiss champ. They've got a Swiss champ, I think it's called the XAVT, that easily sticks out another saw blade or knife blade thickness on top of this Swiss champ that's there.
It's a brick.
I love my Huntsman. One of the biggest things I love with it is it has a pair of scissors and it has a saw as the other two, like, in the middle accessories, other than your standard tinker, can opener, or whatever type of thing.
I was going to say the one thing that I actually do miss from this would be a saw blade. If I could have that saw blade here, even instead of a secondary blade, I think would make me happy. And I think we're on the same page where we kind of regard these as outdoorsman tools more than urban tools.
I think so. And I think these can be an outdoorsy, but I don't think that's what they were intended for. And I think
they're definitely more
their
easy.
places, yeah. Now, I also have to call out this little guy here because people joke around that it's the most useless thing and they don't know why it's on there. Okay, so we do a lot of camping. We do a lot of backcountry stuff. We use a lot of 550 paracord. And with the 550 paracord, sometimes you use some very nice slip knots and for a half inches.
Half inch.
Yeah. Sorry, let's get that through. Yeah. Some half hitches, notches that are easy to take apart and stuff like that. But sometimes you are rushed and you're just doing a single double knot or whatever. You're rushed, it's raining, you're trying to get a tarp up. You're not time to think about what knot you want to do. You just want to cinch it down and get some cover. Afterwards, you're trying to take it apart. You're trying to save paracords, trying to bag that back up instead of just cutting it because hopefully we're trying to conserve as much as we can, and paracord very much is reusable. This hook you can dig into 550, and I have got some ridiculous knots loose with this little hook using it for 550 paracord when I'm out in a camping or a hunting or a whatever survival situation.
My first thought was almost like tying a skate. Like the skate lacing tools.
And
for pulling something tight,
for sure.
Would be really good with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, more of an EDC urban, even it's got some functions. It's got some ingenuities other than the parcel carry that it was developed for back in the 50s and 60s type of idea, right? So,
and just kind of jumping in and touching base onto the whole, how we kind of feel that the Swiss Army stuff is a little bit more outdoorsy, rural sort of stuff, whereas the Leatherman is a little bit more urban, mechanical. Leatherman has tried.
Yes.
They came out a couple of years ago with the Signal model, and it is a very minimal sort of guide that they were figuring would be good for out in the field and out in the bush and stuff. It doesn't like to open when the pliers aren't closed over, though. Some of them do have a bit of that safety. There's not many tools in this guy.
Yeah.
As for the actual tools in it, if I can get the last one there, that's pretty much it.
So the yellow tools or something to dabble on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into, is that as far as the actual tools, that is all they have. But they do have the couple little accessories that they added in to make it the outdoorsy thing that they're trying for here.
The one thing that I will say that I do like is the fact that the file is removable, so you can sharpen your own knife.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is nice.
So one of the clever things they did is one of the complaints you've got is on any sort of one of these tools is you've got a file that's even a diamond file on the Leatherman Wave. And you can actually sharpen things like your axe, your machete. You can sharpen everything except for
your own knife.
Your Leatherman Wave.
Yeah.
You can't sharpen it with your file. So being able to remove it and being able to sharpen it. Now, with how small it is, I have to comment on the fact that the only thing you're going to be sharpening with your diamond sharpener is the knife blade on your Leatherman. Yeah. And it's even triangular. The diamond steel, I can pick it up.
It's so tiny.
If you look at it in the shape that it has, it is actually so you can get into some of those teeth.
It would fit in the serrations for sure.
And get them sharpened. But when you look at the size and the length of it, I'm not sharpening a machete by any means.
No.
And if you were determined to sharpen an axe, you would be sitting there for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Extremely long.
To try to do that in a survival situation.
And then the other piece in there that they're having in there to try and claim this tool is the outdoorsy guy, is the little ferricium fire sparker rod and emergency whistle.
Okay, and then just something now that I noticed that I have to comment on. When that is not in place, the pliers goes all the way through the back of the handle.
What happens when you try to close from the pivot here? When you pinch it shut, does it wiggle afterwards?
You can get it closed, but you have to put your finger here to be able to brace it closed. And once it gets closed, it's locked in. But with that going through, that also tells me that the only thing that's holding the players in place and not busting out the back
It's a piece of plastic.
is this piece of plastic on
And
the
a
back
ferrocerium
side.
rod.
Mm-hmm.
This inanimate rod.
So, as far as integrity of a Leatherman goes,
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Mhm.
And I just noticed it now as we were displaying. That's not something I've realized before in the past with this tool. I have my gripes about this tool, but that wasn't one of them. Now
Now
I
it
have
is.
another
Yeah.
gripe.
Yeah, wow, that's almost impressive.
Like in thinking about how thick that piece of plastic is that's holding it in place, and what this mold seam down the center
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
of what that piece of plastic.
Yeah. That's.
And that's literally
Not
what's every time you close your Leatherman.
You're pressing against that.
That is what's closing your Leatherman.
Mm.
That is, yeah.
Concerning. Nothing taking away from Leatherman, because don't get me wrong, where's the super tool? It's a beast of a knife.
They definitely have some beefy, tough models. That one's in question as far as the beefy toughness of
And
it.
again,
though.
we were talking about the signal. But again, we get into some of the ridiculous Swiss Army, and we talk about the reliability and the strength.
Yeah.
But you get further and further apart. Oh, and this one doesn't have it. I do have 2 of these blue Huntsmans.
Mhm.
I do have a cracked handle
Okay.
on one of mine. So if we're going to do some complaining about some stuff and some...
Plastic handle. Although they do address plastic handles.
They do, but in a limited fashion. I can't get a Huntsman in A-Lux.
Yeah.
And you have to sacrifice your toothpick and tweezers.
We didn't
Yeah.
talk about much about those. Yeah.
And I have used the Swiss Army tweezers. As much of a pain as they are,
Oh, yeah.
realistically speaking,
I've dug splinters out of my fingers with these before.
I've had them come in handy in a couple of
Mhm.
situations. So, having said that, you were just inspecting that as we were chatting.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, I'm concerned on that for sure.
And I know we were talking in a Benchmade episode about don't worry about plastic. Plastic is tough. It's not like, because we're throwing reptilians.
Yeah.
I just hope Leatherman's plastic can be as tough and as tested.
Well, and it also
Yeah.
depends
Yeah.
about the construction, right? It looks like that's a snap fit out of 2 different pieces around the ferro rod.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is for sure.
So I would be
Yeah.
a little bit concerned about any kind of mechanical wear causing that to fail eventually.
And
right?
Leatherman's
Eventually,
not kind of hyped up on their plastic.
No,
it's-
not at all.
Swiss Army has issues with their plastic cracking and stuff, and they're known for the plastic. But Leatherman is a steel company, and all of a sudden they're getting molded injected
And now
plastic.
they're getting into plastic, and you're like,
Well, they
how
have the
good is their
they have
plastic?
the Junior as well, and that was one with a blade you could install after buying or after you decide
The
that.
Leap.
Sorry, yeah, the Leap, and then the after you decide that my kid's all right.
This guy is a junior. Talking about the Leap like it's a junior.
Well, what was the My First Victorinox, was that called the Junior?
The rounded one?
Yeah.
I
What was
no.
that?
No, that's my first Victorinox.
Oh, that's like the full name.
Literally.
Oh, that's so on the nose. That's so upsetting. That's stupid. That's
All
okay.
right. All right.
Yeah, no, it's weird. I mean, I don't know that I would take this out.
Yeah, I would not myself.
I mean, I'd rather take another leather.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely other Leatherman choices I
Oh,
would take out first. Over
And
that
to tell
one.
the truth, we don't have one here, and unfortunately, and I don't know if we should name drop it now, but we might as well. Cutting Edge Cutlery loaned us pretty much the selection of what we got, other
Yeah.
than the offerings that Joe and I owned, which is a couple of these. Is that everything?
I think so.
Yeah.
To give us some examples of some awesome Leathermans and multi-tools, because other than being biased, you have a super tool.
Yep,
I
I
think-
have one of the original Super Tools. I had actually found it in a parking lot in like 96 or 97.
It's got a patent pending. That's how
Yeah.
old the super tool
Yeah.
is.
So I still have it kicking around, but seeing how I found it in a parking lot in the wintertime while I was a teenager and I didn't clean it up very well, it's not in the best condition at this point in time, so it's not showable.
It's got some function issues.
Yes, it does.
May or may
have-
not be able to open.
No.
You have a Leatherman Surge
I have a Surge.
hidden somewhere
It's in my camping gear somewhere
in the depths of
in the depths
Paul
of my basement.
not doing his job. Anyway,
That's probably true.
the only multi-tool I have, and the only multi-tool I've had for many years is a Huntsman, other than the Fisherman I had when I was a kid. But I love the Huntsman. I thought about getting a Ranger because it has the file. Oh, where's the file?
No.
Where's the saw? No, it's
No.
I just have to get those two out so I can get the file.
New.
Oh, that file is... Oh, it's Nail Nicky. That's why. I could have just looked at the other side and realized that it had a nail nick. Okay, so the file definitely has some finishing EDC as well as some hunting, bushcrafty, trappy, whatever applications. You probably could rough out an edge on your machete or your axe if you needed to on the file. And the Huntsman, the Ranger is a Huntsman with a file. Slightly bigger, and I don't know if I would want to upgrade to that still. I love the Wave. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the interchangeable screwdriver thing, I'm not sold on the gimmick behind it. The square flat ones, and they will get their job done. Like you've got your Skeletool that's got some of those, and this one has the Wave.
I have to say that these tend to be a little bit smaller and give more variety than what you get out of the fixed tools, the ones that don't that
Way
can't be
more
changed.
variety, for sure.
And for my uses, it seems to be okay. But I mean, if you haven't found a use for them yet, you probably won't.
No.
Yeah.
So honestly, I would pick ones like the Super Tools baby brother, the Rebar. I'm a really big fan of the Rebar, but even still, for a smaller tool and a multi-tool, and for what I'm doing, I still think in a smaller package and for what I'm doing, this is going to be good enough for me and what I love.
Yeah, as far as like a tinker working in a workshop, fixing up random tools, stuff like that, definitely the Leatherman is the way to go in my mind. But as far as any camping, outdoorsy, that sort of stuff, I definitely lean towards the Swiss Army knives.
I think so.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Well, I think that's probably it. I think,
Yeah, that was a good, fairly thorough rundown of the sorts of varieties that you can get of the multi-tools, whatever style that is out there.
From city use to the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you can have anything in between.
Yeah.
There's some applications. We were talking about Leathermans with guns.
Mm-hmm.
And we were out hunting with a couple buddies, and they had some problems with their optics and things like that. And I'm sure, like, if you had a Leatherman, I had a Swiss Army on me,
Yeah.
but he needed a torque screw. And with the expanding kit that you might be able to have with a Skeletool or a Wave, you have the Torques, and you don't have that option with a Swiss Army in your pocket.
Of course.
But when it came to mealtime, and it was ready to open the cans of soup to go along with the rest of our meal,
It was very convenient.
first thing Nigel asked was, "Where's your Swiss Army knife?"
Yeah.
In my pocket, because that's where it belongs, right? So, yeah. Anyway, I think there is some outdoorsy applications. I just don't think I personally use them with the leather.
No.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to a personal preference thing.
And
Tools for the right. Right tool for the right job.
a personalized application.
If I'm out with somebody else and they've got one of these, I'm going to throw one of these in my pocket.
Yeah,
that kind of
the complementary.
Exactly.
For sure.
All right.
Yeah, that seems like we're all rounded up, so we're going to cut it here. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We will catch you again next week. Nigel the Smith signing off.
I am who I am. I'm Dennis Vipers.
I am the Iron Joe.
And I'm XL.ca.
Alrighty. Catch y'all later, folks.